minute or so to see if anybody else is going to join us. I do want to send my apologies again for the confusion this morning. We were aware that there was limitations to the system. We just weren't aware that the limitations to the system was as low as it was. So I appreciate you, excuse me, being flexible enough to join us this afternoon for the second round of this webinar. And depending on the feedback that we get, potentially be adding a third one later on in the week. So my apologies again for the confusion, but I appreciate you hanging in there with me this afternoon. So we will go ahead and get started. This is the exact same presentation that I provided earlier this morning on the webinar. There will be no new information provided, just the identical presentation that we had planned this morning. So this session is being recorded, as was the morning session, and we'll be posting these later on our website. And again, I'll make the reminder, if you please could mute your lines on your end, I appreciate it. So later on this afternoon, this presentation, these slides, and the guidance, the formal guidance itself, will be emailed out to everyone later on this afternoon. It may not be right after the webinar. I have to take off for another meeting, but when I get back, I'll be sending out to you later on this afternoon. So we will get started. And again, if you have any questions, please hold them until the end. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We wanted to take this opportunity to roll out the guidance as close to face-to-face as we could, rather than just sending it out to an email to all of you and waiting until January regional meetings to discuss this more in depth. Hopefully we will give you an overview of the new shared plan model and provide you with some answers to your early questions. Again, please hold your questions until after the presentation, and that'll give me the opportunity to kind of roll through this and maybe see if some of your questions are answered during the length of the presentation. We will be finished. This morning took about 45 minutes or so, so we will be done before the hour is up, so please hang in there with me. Creating a planning process is not a new requirement of the Family and Children First Councils. Since the inception of Family Children First in the mid-90s, there has always been a requirement of councils to elevate and prioritize services, fill gaps, and create new strategies to achieve better results. This requirement looked different in each county and was completed to levels of varying degrees. There was not a prescriptive approach provided, and counties developed their own informal approaches based on community resources and the staff that they had available to them and resources at the time. In 2006, the informal process became more formalized with the passage of House Bill 289 that required councils to establish a formal process to identify priorities, monitor the progress of meeting those priorities, and develop an annual plan that identifies cross-system efforts to increase child and family well-being in the county. And the results of these plans were to be reported annually to our office, and that is still the case today. Excuse me. As the process of House Bill 289 required counties to become more prescriptive in their planning process, feedback that was received over a number of years indicated that this planning work was possibly duplicative to work already being completed by each of the Family Children First Council mandated members for their respective state departments. Please, again, if you could please mute your line. According to the feedback, each of the Family and Children First members were required to conduct a similar process. And the House Bill 289 process seemed to add another layer to that work, and that work was viewed as duplicative by many of the stakeholders around the state of Ohio. Again, I'm sorry. Can I please ask everyone to mute their phones, please, especially if you're on a car phone? Thank you. Based on this feedback, Ohio Family and Children First, in partnership with The Ohio State University, transitioned the annual House Bill 289 process into a shared planning model that was designed to take into account the work currently happening with system partners and use that work to identify a longer-term strategic plan built upon shared priorities that were culminated from each of the system plans. So basically what we were asking each of the counties to do was to get access to the plans that you had from your system partners, comb those plans to identify shared priorities, and then plan around those priorities. The shared planning model was a simplified process, as I said, that was built to build upon the data-informed plans that already existed in the community, not just from your mandated members, but from your statewide or your countywide stakeholders as well. The shared plan model called for each Family and Children First to review the system plans to see where there's overlapping priorities and could potentially be better accessed across systems to eliminate duplication in planning, resources, and staff time. The shared planning process was developed and reviewed by a group of counties that provided feedback to help clarify the process and identify local plans that could be included in the review process itself. That feedback informed the final version that was then also piloted by the 25 family and civic engagement counties at that time. Guidance and the affiliated training was then rolled out statewide as the County Family and Children First Councils created their first 4-year strategic plans. Again, I ask everyone to put their lines on mutes, please. As the thank you. I appreciate the help. As the results of the developed shared plans were reviewed, feedback started to roll in that indicated inconsistencies with the local plans that were reviewed. Feedback of those plan inconsistencies started to be echoed across the state. There was feedback provided that indicated a lack of consistency in the availability of the local plans and the types of plans that were available, the quality and scope of the plans, the time frame in which the plans were written. Some were annual plans, others were longer-term strategic plans, and some plans are very short-term for very specific populations. I also looked at the data that was used to develop the plans and the overall usefulness of the plans included in the shared planning process. As the time frame for the current plans was ending, it was clear based on the feedback that additional modifications were going to be needed as the counties developed their next multi-year shared plans coming out of state fiscal year 2015. Based on the feedback that was provided, the varied results of the previous planning process and the amount of turnover in the Family and Children First coordinator positions and the local mandated members as a whole, it was decided that a new foundation on the shared plan model needed to be built. Researching various planning processes and procedures, it was discovered that the collective impact model had similar components to the Family and Children First planning process already in place, but it provided a more community-wide view on how shared priorities are identified and addressed within the individual shared plans. The collective impact model allowed for the combing of local system plans, but provides leeway for counties to identify shared priorities in a variety of ways. That's one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we built into the system, was to provide flexibility on how your priorities and your outcomes were decided upon. And I'll touch on that in just a few minutes. But as I discussed at the annual meeting, the Coordinators Association annual meeting back in October, the collective impact model is built upon 5 interconnected components that are designed to produce strong alignment among system partners to lead to large-scale community results. The 5 components include developing a common agenda, where all participants share a vision for change that includes a common understanding of the problem and a joint approach to solving the problem through agreed upon actions. You have shared measurement. All participating organizations agree on the ways success will be measured and reported to the community. Mutually reinforcing activities. The organizations agree to coordinate a set of differentiated activities through a mutually reinforcing plan of action. And I know that sounds nebulous and complicated, but I'll talk about that more here in depth in just a few minutes. You have continuous communication. All stakeholders engage in frequent and structured open communication to build trust, assure mutual objectives, and create common motivation. And finally, backbone support. An independent staff that is dedicated to the initiative that provides ongoing support by guiding the initiative's vision and strategy, supporting aligned activities, establishing shared measurement practices, and advancing policy, and mobilizing resources. So that's just a brief background of the core 5 components of the shared plan model. What I want to stress is it's important to note that what we're going to be doing in the new shared plan process, that it's not going to be a carbon copy of the collective impact model. Rather, it'll be utilizing some of the components as the foundational components of the shared plan process going forward. So we're not going to be asking counties to undergo collective impact in their communities, but what we're going to be doing is borrowing some of the components to help strengthen the shared planning model as we have it moving forward. Just for the sake of timing and for the sake of all the work that was put into the shared plan model and the usefulness of the model as a whole, we've attempted to utilize as much of the current process as possible, as I said, while borrowing parts of the collective impact model that will hopefully address the inconsistencies that came to light in the previous efforts. So what I want to do now is just to get into some of the specifics of what we're going to be asking counties to do as they work to develop their new plans. We would still like for counties to identify their current initiatives that they have running through their Family and Children First Councils. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list of county programming, but only those initiatives that are tied directly to your local council. We'll be asking you to conduct some sort of process to identify additional shared priorities that are not currently identified in your initiatives inventory. These priorities can be issue-specific, infrastructure in nature, and or enhancing the capacity of your local Family and Children First Council to collaborate. We will not be asking Family and Children First Councils to conduct any formal needs assessment processes or identify these priorities in any prescriptive way. We only ask that the councils identify a constructive process to identify what your shared priorities are going to be for planning. And this is where we tried to build in as much flexibility as possible. We're not going to say, okay, here is the model to do a needs assessment. Here is a structured model in which you can do a needs assessment. What we're asking you to do is to find out what works best for your community and do that. But we do want to make sure that the process is still data informed, and it should be based upon the collective knowledge of each of the members around your council tables. So this is where we try to build in some of the flexibility on the front end as you work to identify what your shared priorities are going to be. The shared outcomes for this process will continue to be the same, as counties will again be asked to identify outcomes associated with the shared priority. These are the directional statements that everyone loves, that highlights what it is to be affected within a larger shared priority. You improve such and such factor, you reduce access to drugs and alcohol, you strengthen this or that. So that will continue, and we'll be asking you to identify what those outcomes are going to be. Counties will again be asked to identify a set of indicators that will track the success of achieving the identified shared outcome. What we have found is having even a small, but make sure that it's a comprehensive set of indicators establishes a common language that supports the action framework and encourages more collaborative problem solving. Now this list may look different from the last set of indicators that were identified in your current shared plans, as this will be an area in which we will capture some of the community level work that is currently happening around the shared priority and shared outcomes. And hopefully that'll be more clear here in just a few minutes. I touched on this a little bit at the annual meeting. Part of the drawback to the previous shared plan process was that we asked counties to drill down too far to identify a single strategy or a set of strategies that was meant to identify change on a larger scale outcome. By drilling down to a single strategy, we inadvertently lost all the associated community work that was going into addressing that identified outcome or priority. And what we're trying to do with this process is to recapture that work and put that work front and center. We hope that this new process, we can then refocus the work on what is currently happening and reformat it in a way to capture the work as a collective instead of disparate pieces and parts. So it'll hopefully become more clear as we provide you with examples here in just a few minutes. So it may be a little bit nebulous now, but bear with us, and as we get through some examples, hopefully it'll become a little bit more clear. Where the big change in the model is going to be is this last component of mutually reinforcing activities. We just talked about asking counties to drill down to identify a single strategy and track that strategy in the hopes that if the strategy was implemented well, you would see impact on the identified outcome and the larger priority. In this version, what we're going to be asking counties to do is to identify mutually reinforcing activities. These MRAs must be differentiated while still being coordinated through a mutually reinforcing plan of action. Hopefully the MRAs will become clear once the work of the different organizations can be mapped out against the same set of indicators and outcomes, which you'll be identifying in that previous work. The idea is looking at what each organization is or could be doing around the priority or outcome within their structure and identify how that work can be filtered up to the community level to realize a true community impact to the identified priority or outcome. What we want to be sure to make clear is that while the mutually reinforcing activities are taking the place of the shared strategies in this model, we still want to provide each county with the opportunity to develop a new or an additional response action on behalf of family and children first. We don't want to limit that possibility, but we feel that it's equally important to identify all the activities occurring in the community that are addressing these priorities. So we're not saying that you don't create something new, don't bring your counties together and create a new strategy. What we're asking you to do is look at what you have currently. Then if there's something that's not currently addressing it to your satisfaction or to the need of the community, then you can look to address creating a brand new strategy. But we're not asking you to create something new out of this process. The templates that you are used to seeing is the same. We made the language modifications. We changed the shared measurements and the MRAs, and those are captured on this format. But it'll be the same format as you have been used to moving forward. So what I want to do now is take an opportunity to go through some examples. And this example is provided in the guidance that you will be emailed later on this afternoon with this presentation. We just want to take a few minutes to walk through this and try to see if we can make this a little bit more clear, as some of it's a little bit more nebulous than what we have been used to. But as you see at the top of the box, we'll still be asking you to identify what your initiatives are going to be, and we provide some examples of that. And I think all of the counties and all of the councils are aware of what they do and how that impacts this work. Again, the shared priorities, we'll be asking you to identify what that is, and looking for example one, we just picked school success as that was one of the major ones that has been present throughout this entire process with the counties in the last strategic plan. Then identified a shared outcome to look at improving kindergarten readiness. So a subset within school success is the community may want to look at how to improve kindergarten readiness. So the changes to this process is the next two parts where the shared measurement and the MRAs come in. So for shared measurement, we're asking you to identify what currently is happening for this example that is already going on in your community that could be tailored to or could be tied to improving kindergarten readiness. So your Help Me Grow transition data, your preschool transition data, your pre-K registrations, what do they look like? What are the long-term KRA scores that the districts are receiving? So looking at trying to identify some shared measurement on how to address kindergarten readiness and how to show that you're improving kindergarten readiness in your community. Then the last part of that is identifying mutually reinforcing activities. And for example, one, what is currently happening that can be tied to kindergarten readiness? So you have successful Help Me Grow Child Find efforts, successful transitions from Part C to Part B. If you have your early childhood coordinating committee still up and running, how is that work tied into kindergarten readiness? What is your early Head Start doing and your Head Starts? What are your daycares doing with Step Up to Quality? So trying to identify the mutually reinforcing activities that are currently happening within your system partners and how that can be tied to a larger shared outcome and a larger shared priority at a community level. So you can look at different examples. Example 2 is timely access to needed services, and you can look at your outcomes and your measurements and what activities are happening there, a county-wide no wrong door, what your Family and Children First service coordination process looks like. Can that be modified to address timely access to needed services? Then you also have strong and high Family and Children First councils, to where you're establishing a committee structure with defined roles and outline of bylaws and so on and so forth. So the major focus of this shared planning process is to identify what's currently happening in your community and tie that up to a community level outcome and priority to where you can use shared measurements to see whether you're making any progress for that or not. And for the shared plan annual report, that is going to look identical to what it is now. We have the language changes in there, and again, as always, this portion of the annual report can be replicated and duplicated, and you can account for all of your indicators that you have in front of your shared measurement. So as I said, in the previous process, it may have just been one measurement, one indicator, and we're asking counties to take a deeper look at what is currently happening and how what is currently happening can be tied together to look at improvement on a community-wide scale. So next steps for Family and Children First. I do have to apologize for the mix-up this morning. We had some additional information that I will try to recapture and provide it for you here. Over the last number of weeks, I have been in conversations with the leadership of the Coordinators Association discussing what resources and training will be available from us here at Ohio Family and Children First when we roll out this new guidance. We have made the commitment to dedicating the majority of our first 3 regional meetings of 2016 to allow counties the opportunities to work more in depth with the model and hopefully get answers to all their questions about the process and towards the end results of the due date of July 31st of 2016. As many of you may remember, during the previous rollout of the Shared Plan guidance, the state already had a working relationship with Ohio State and the Center for Learning Excellence on multiple initiatives. And the development, training, and technical assistance of that Shared Plan model was rolled up into that work. Unfortunately, that is not the case this time. However, I have been in discussions with the leadership of the association on what association supported training and technical assistance might look like if that opportunity arises. We are currently having joint discussions with Ohio State and SEAT, which was the old CLEX. Many of you are familiar with what we have done in the capacity work this calendar year, and we've been discussing or having conversations with them about taking up the mantle, providing training and technical assistance around this new model, and those discussions at this point seem promising. The discussions will be ongoing, but Ohio State has always been a great partner of ours, and we kind of sought their guidance as we were revamping this shared plan and the model and the guidance, and we had multiple meetings with them talking about what does this look like, what does that look like, how can we change this for the better, so on and so forth. And they provided us with their expertise and organization and around what this is going to look like. So this morning they reviewed, and it's on your current slide right now, some next steps for Family and Children First Councils between today and the January regional meetings. They talked about if you have the opportunity to convene your council, if you have a meeting coming up, and provide orientation to the shared planning guidance and expectations. As I said, all of this will be emailed out to you later on this afternoon. Keeping our fingers crossed, hopefully prepared to receive a set of tools and procedures designed to aid in the facilitation of the shared planning at the January regional meetings, and to participate in the regional meetings in March and May to engage in technical assistance and get your questions answered. One of the conversations that we have had with OSU is developing a workbook to guide counties through this process in a manner and in a time frame that is conducive to the 6.5 months that I'm providing you to develop your shared plan. So we're having conversations with the association to see if we can make that happen. As I said, it seems promising at this point, but we'll have more details about that coming up. But the folks over at OSU have taken the opportunity to look at some of the former tools that were introduced in the last shared planning process and tweaking them to what we needed today to, again, be feasible in the 6.5 months that we're asking you to put this plan together. So you'll be hearing about that a little bit more. But we will be providing the majority of our time in the first 3 meetings of 2016 for counties to work through this process, work together, ask questions, hopefully get your questions answered, and just bounce ideas off of each other how your counties are handling this and that. I do want to stress that there is no guarantees that this joint training will occur. But as I said, they've been kind enough to offer their guidance and support, so hopefully we can make some sort of arrangements moving forward and making that information available to you on a one-to-one basis. The last thing I want to touch on before turning it over to questions and answers is information about the regional meetings. Just an FYI, you'll be receiving more information about this coming from our office after the beginning of the calendar year. We will be extending each of the meetings in January in an attempt to provide you with ample time to bring your questions and review the guidance and start working through the process of rolling out any identified resources. And the reason why we're doing this for January specifically is that we've made the commitment to our engaged counties that the afternoon of the January meetings will be focusing on the engaged learning communities. So those will still start at 1 o'clock. But we also want to provide you some extra time to work through this. We'll go over a brief rollout of the shared plan, try to answer any beginning questions, then try to then provide you with the resources that we have available to you. So we're going to extend each of the January regional meetings from 9:30 to 12:30. Then we'll take a break for those counties that are going to be participating in the engaged learning communities, and we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock. Then the March and May ongoing training and technical assistance as needed, and that's how we're going to have it mapped out as we roll out this process. So again, my apologies for the confusion this morning. It was just basically my lack of knowledge of the limitations of the system that we're using, and I did not mean to have a bunch of people shut out. But hopefully many of you were able to join us this afternoon, and I'll try to now answer any questions that you have. So if you just want to go ahead and just take turns, and we'll try to get your questions answered. And make sure when you ask your question that you do unmute yourself. Thank you. So any questions at all? I did that stellar of a job? Wow. Okay. Well, if there's no questions, you can email me after you look at it, and it doesn't make sense to you for whatever reason. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions after the webinar. But here before the end of the day, you'll be receiving this presentation and the formal guidance in its entirety. So last opportunity to ask any questions.
Chad, this is Diane Carter. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Diane.
Do you have any expectations as far as the numbers of the
Diane, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Do you have any expectations as far as the breadth of this plan? On my part, I'd rather start out with a smaller number and something that's doable and add to it.
No, I mean it's your decision locally on how you want to identify those priorities. We just ask that there will be a structured way in which those are identified, and you make sure that you incorporate the knowledge that you have around the table to do so. We try to open up with flexibility, but we want to make sure that our concerns are that it's just not one person putting the plan. It's not the council coordinator doing all this work. So we've kind of traded off the prescriptive part of this to allow flexibility, but we want to make sure that the council voices, your council members' voices, are part of this process moving forward. So it's a balancing act. So we'll leave it up to the communities on how they want to identify what that process is going to look like.
Yes, and I love that flexibility that you're giving us. I really do. So then, like, with every year, is this how it could work? Like we develop a pretty conservative plan the first year, but then as we gain more experience, we add in subsequent years, and just add to that plan?
Yeah, the report will be the same. So we'll ask you if you have made any change or if you're planning to make any change. So this is not just a standalone document. We hope that this is a document that will continue to breathe, and you can make changes to it along the way and add and detract wherever you feel it's necessary. So if you want to build upon it each and every year, that is well within your ability to do so.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? One of the questions that was brought up in the earlier session this morning was there was concern about the planning process and part-time coordinators only having so many hours a week and a month to be able to do this work. And they were reassured by the folks at OSU this morning. Melissa Ross and Dave Julian were on the call this morning, but unfortunately unable to join us this afternoon in this this impromptu call, that there are going to be tools that you can utilize with your council in a very short time frame. There will be required a couple of meetings, but this isn't time intensive to where you're going to have to meet every week or every 2 weeks or multiple times a month to go through this process. You can be able to do it maybe 2 or 3 meetings over the next 6 months. So it's not as time intensive, it's not as labor intensive as the last process was, knowing that that a lot of the knowledge around your table can get through a process without going through every single step of the tools that we're going to be providing you. But we're providing you with those tools for those counties that need every single one of those steps to guide their council through this process. So anything else? Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come back on this afternoon. I appreciate that. I do apologize again for the mix-up this morning. I will email out this presentation and the guidance to you later on this afternoon, and we will look forward to seeing you at the January regional meetings. So if I don't get a chance to talk to you between now and then, I hope you and your family have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday Season, and we will see you in 2016. Thank you very much.